Now and then a design comes along that challenges our fundamental understanding of how a watch should look or operate mechanically, with Ressence being one of the most exciting brands in this kind of boundary pushing space. In this video, we'll take a closer look at the Type 3 BB, an oil-filled mechanical watch that is legitimately unlike anything else on the market. Let's jump in. Now, before we jump in, definitely check out our updated blog looking at some of the more crazy, unique watches out there on the market. If you like this style of watchmaking, we'll have a complete write-up down below. Check it out in the description. Also, be sure to subscribe to our weekly newsletter. We're gonna be releasing much more written content. We just hired a full-time editorial writer that's been in the industry for 15 years, Mark Bernardo. He worked at Watch Time, and really excited about continuing to scale that part of our just content schedule and giving you guys equally what we're doing here on the video side and really putting the same amount of effort on the written side. If you want that to your inbox every single week, be sure to subscribe on the newsletter down at the bottom of the website. Just fill out the quick questionnaire and then we'll be good to go. Check it out now, teddybaldassarre.com. So I know most of the questions are going to be, how does this thing work? What is going on with this? But before we do that, let's just get into some of the background about this business as well as the model family for this brand. Now, Ressence is a relatively new brand on the scene, having been established in 2010 in Belgium, a country not typically associated with watchmaking. Founder industrial designer Benoit Mintien crafted the brand and derived the name from the words Renaissance and essence, speaking to the brand's overall approach of taking the basic concept of a wristwatch, but reimagine it with modern technology and user experience in mind. After a series of prototypes entitled the 0 Series and a first production model known as the Series 1, Ressence cemented its modern design concept with the 44mm Type 3 in 2013, earning the Horological Revelation Prize at the GPHG in Geneva that same year. Now, shortly thereafter, the brand released the smaller and thinner 42mm non-oil filled Type 1 in 2014, with a gigantic diving-oriented 46mm Type 5 to follow in 2015. And while the entire modern Ressence collection utilizes a similar visual design format, time display, and shares a number of technical innovations, it is the Type 3 in many ways that defines really what Ressence is all about in the eyes of enthusiasts. For the purpose of this review, we'll be taking a look at this Type 3 BB, or Black, with the latter indicating the DLC-coated Grade 5 titanium case in black dial variant. To start, let's go into what exactly is happening from an engineering perspective, and then we can follow up on how you actually set this watch. So the Type 3 presents as a sort of rounded disc with a pebble-like shape constructed from two rounded sapphire domes, demarcated by a Grade 5 titanium central case that includes the 22mm lugs and separates the dry mechanical back half of the watch from the front half of the watch, which is filled with 35.7mm of oil, which for context is over half a filled shot glass of liquid. So the oil is utilized to achieve a few end results, but the first point is the ability to eliminate glare at extreme angles and removing any sense of depth between the sapphire crystal and the underlying dial elements beneath, giving the appearance as if you can freely just grab the dial indicators without any interruption. So the actual timekeeping here is mechanical and automatic. You have the ROCS 3.5, which utilizes an ETA 2824 base and is safely positioned in the dry back portion of the watch case, separated from the oil by a titanium membrane as well as a Faraday cage that surrounds the movement and offers a degree of protection from magnetic fields. And for those and anyone preparing to say this is a lot of money for an ETA caliber, that is a very oversimplification of reality and what's happening here, as this base movement will offer the same general beat frequency, sure, and power reserve. However, it is paired with a complex in-house modular system of 215 parts developed by Ressence to achieve this unique execution with what the brand calls the Ressence Orbital convex system. So in order to communicate the front of the watch without the risk of a leak, the caliber and the dial display are coupled by a proprietary magnetic transmission with powerful magnets on both sides that keep the opposing side of the watch in perfect alignment as the watch is running without the need for a point of physical connection or mechanical interaction. with each side of the case acting as its own fully sealed system. And because the volume displaced by the oil inside of the watch can vary to a degree depending on the temperature, a system of 7 small bellows is also integrated to avoid the possibility of a bubble in the display, which would disrupt the otherwise perfect visibility of the dial elements. And if the temperature of the oil is reaching an extreme, whether hot or cold, that would endanger the functionality of the watch. But this watch does have an oil temperature gauge that is included among the many dial elements, making the user aware if they are entering a difficult situation. So if the oil-filled construction, unique movement execution, and magnetic transmission didn't already offer enough in the way of technical innovation, the Type 3 also obviates the use of a crown, utilizing a novel caseback system that can be rotated in both directions to either set or wind the watch and set its functions, with the dial and all of the sub-registers also rotating along with the movement inside the caseback, which is a mesmerizing feature the first time you experience it firsthand and start rotating all of those indicators around. So the dial itself is constructed from a convex piece of grade 5 titanium and tracks 6 individual functions. Moving in a traditional hours, minutes, and seconds type of order, a prominent sub-register with the Ressence hand logo at the 12 tracks the hour of the day on that 12-hour scale, with the minutes indicated with a separate central hand in collaboration with a set of printed markers just outside the dial's central surface. A small sub-seconds register of sorts is here, known as the function indicator, and makes one complete revolution every 6 minutes or 360 seconds, while also letting you know when the watch is indeed running. In addition to more basic time telling, the Ressence Type 3 demonstrates the day of the week with another sub-dial divided into 7 parts, with the weekend days outlined in orange, with these also doubling as a day-night indication, depending on whether the hand is positioned to the front or the back of those half markers. So a nice multi-use there. The date is shown with an orange arrow located at the 30-minute position on the minute track, pointing to a rotating ring near the very edge of the dial's rounded surface, and can be quick set with the help of the caseback, which we can show in a moment. Intriguingly, superluminova is utilized on virtually every printed surface of this dial, and the watch presents an impressive display of incandescence when in reduced lighting environments. This was probably the least, or maybe the most unexpected highlight of this watch. We turned off the lights, got some shots of this watch, and we're just like, wow, the lume on this thing is fantastic, and it almost looks as cool, or if not cooler, when the lights are off and you start setting the time. So while this watch can be a bit confusing at first, let's actually get into the methodology behind this time display, as it is easier than what kind of just meets the eye. With the dial facing up, turning the entire case back in one direction sets the day of the week and the date, while turning in the other direction changes the actual hour and minutes. Now, with the dial facing down, you then can easily see the indicators that provide guidance on the case back on which way you will need to turn to set the time, while also being able to hand wind the watch if needed. It can be done by rotating the case back until you feel some resistance and a sharp and somewhat jarring click that the second you do it, you're almost second guessing, oh boy, did I break this thing? However, be rest assured, you are fine. Once you feel the click, you then can proceed and then go back and forth with a quick back and forth motion, and you'll feel the winding taking place until the watch starts running. This watch does have an oscillating weight, so winding is not necessarily required, although this ingenious kind of method of hand winding is pretty cool in how they're able to work around not having a crown. Now, so far we've been speaking to the novelty of this watch as an item, irrespective of how it actually wears on the wrist. The good news is this actually does still wear like a watch, as I'm wearing it on my wrist right now, and I don't think it even looks that out of place, even for a smaller wrist. Although not small, the 44mm case that comes in grade 5 titanium presents a wearing experience that is, like everything else about this piece, different than the norm. At this case diameter, it would be fair to expect relatively large wearing experience, but somehow the rounded case back and smoothly sloping front-facing surfaces and lack of a crown helps this piece wear, I would say, smaller than the proposed dimensions, feeling more like a 42.5mm watch in my opinion. Now, the thickness, while not insignificant at 15mm, is also broken up by that rounded nature of the case shape, and is also understandable for the level of complexity inherent in a unique design like this. Now, the lugs do shoot out quite a bit. They're also in DLC titanium, lug to lug at 52mm, and are sharply angled down towards the wrist, so that is helping a bit. But again, all things considered, this is on the larger end of watch sizes, but I think it's all comes down to what are you used to, and then what is this watch going for? And this watch is going for something completely different than most watches out there. Set within the non-removable one-piece wire style lugs, we have a leather strap that uniquely wraps around the lug bar and can be easily removed for replacement if worn. Now, this strap doesn't feel as well done as some other aspects of this design, but the novelty of its function is certainly in line with the brand's experiential type of ethos. So now looking at this watch, let's just talk in a bit more detail about what is going on with this piece. Just some general things that I think are, at the end of the day, probably the strongest considerations for people that might look in the direction of this watch. Now, let's just be honest here. This is an expensive watch. We're talking north of $40,000 for this particular example for this Type 3 black. That is a crazy amount of money, no matter what you're going for. And this is a pretty novel and polarizing design to go along with that. So it's a very specific type of individual that's gonna go for a watch like this. But let's just speak to what this watch is bringing to the table. And I think when you're talking about people that always bring up this idea, where's something new? What out there is really pushing the envelope, or at least trying something different than what has just worked as a conventional point for so long in watchmaking? This completely flips everything upside down that what you probably know a watch to be. It looks like a piece of wearable tech, but the amount of just ingenuity that was put into the design of this, I think is impressive. Even though this is not something that I would necessarily go out of my way and really make a priority to own, I just think it's so cool to actually handle a watch that is going a different way and doing something that is truly unique. The tech here is impressive. I know some people are gonna say, oh, it's an ETA 2824, but that does not tell the full story of this watch. How they're able to go around winding the watch with that new modular system inside here, the oil-filled system, although it is going to smudge up like crazy. That double dome effect is not going to really look great when you get some fingerprint oil on that, so just kind of keep that in mind. But this is such a cool expression of just uniqueness when you're looking at just engineering, if you have any liking to that, and just thinking of creative ways to execute something very simple and rudimentary. I think you have to at least appreciate what's going on here. Visibility and lume is also fantastic. And speaking to servicing, so looking at online and doing some research about this, it seems that the servicing of this watch is actually not that expensive compared to maybe what you might think. You just see this very unorthodox approach to watchmaking and what's taking place. You might think, okay, this is gonna be really expensive. But I found a interesting write-up on WatchUseek. It was just a forum post, and somebody was talking about, hey, they had an issue with the temperature, there was a bubble forming on the front of the watch, and basically they went through full service, it was $600. They really documented that well. I can link to that down below. But the fact that this isn't going to be a crazy expensive piece to maybe maintain is also beneficial. I think that's one of the concerns when I first looked at this thing. I'm like, oh boy, this is gonna be expensive to maintain. But apparently that is actually not as much the case. So is this thing expensive, and does it make sense for majority of people out there? No, majority of people it makes absolutely no sense for, and it is indeed expensive. However, I think at the end of the day, when on this channel, I always like to look at expressions of creativity. I looked at MB&F, I looked at some other brands like Moser that are just doing things differently. And when you get into this independent realm of watchmaking, it's a different type of approach that you need to have. And I think Ressence is a great just example of doing something fresh, different. Even if the price is not for you, I think you have to at least applaud when someone is doing something different, because there's not enough people doing it in the world of watchmaking. But all right, guys, what are your take on Ressence watches? I know there's probably a lot of people out there that have not handled these watches before, but just how they maybe appear on camera, and if you have experienced these watches, what was your take on them? I'd love to see comments down below. I know this is an unconventional type of watch, but to me, it's just kind of struck me as being as unique as they come in watchmaking. And I know people in the community of watch enthusiasm have known about Ressence for some time, but still, I think it is good to have a spotlight on this brand because they are doing some different things when it comes to what they're producing at the end product perspective. If you guys did like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. It's a great indicator that you like these style of videos covering watches of this stature. Also be sure to check out TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, and a full factory warranty for all of our new products. And definitely check out our new pre-owned section, getting new watches in every single week. Some great value picks there that we're going ahead, curating, authenticating, and really appreciate all the great feedback on that so far. And if you're also looking to sell your watch, definitely hit us up as well. Fill out the form on the sell page of our website. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I'll see you all very soon.